Tonight on The Wrap, the Met Police to review Lord Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein. The latest batch of Epstein files appear to suggest he shared sensitive government documents with the convicted paedophile while a senior minister. Sir Keir Starmer says Lord Mandelson should be stripped of his peerage. But the PM himself now also facing questions about why he made the Labour peer an ambassador. Also in the file, Sarah Ferguson's apparent offer to marry Jeffrey Epstein, describing him as a legend for his generosity and kindness. So just why did senior members of the British establishment choose to have such links with a man they knew was a sex offender? Plus, FIFA's president tells us he's sorry for making a joke about British football fans.
I offended, the Scots, the Welsh and the Northern Irish, so I need to first apologise.
And do AI bots secretly plot the downfall of their human masters? We investigate what happens when they're left to their own devices. We discuss the day's biggest stories with Baroness Arlene Foster and Aubrey Allegretti, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including coverage of the calls for a police investigation into Lord Mandelson. Well, good evening to you, Aubrey and Arlene. Things are certainly getting even more serious, aren't they, for Lord Mandelson? Arlene?
Well, there's only one story in town tonight, and I have a feeling it's going to be around for a few days now, and that's, of course, the Peter Mandelson saga.
Aubrey.
Certainly, with nearly 6,000 mentions in the latest tranche of the Epstein files, Mr Mandelson is set to dominate. I think Keir Starmer's really tried to come out and position himself at the heart of the public anger, getting on their side. But clearly, there are knives out for the Prime Minister and one of his key advisers.
Yeah, so what are the details then? Some of the emails suggesting that Lord Mandelson passed on sensitive information that he was privy to as the business secretary, of course, under Gordon Brown, to Jeffrey Epstein. Police say they are now looking at it. Tonight, Lord Mandelson is quoted by your paper, in fact, Aubrey, as saying that none of the Epstein files indicate wrongdoing or misdemeanour in his part. We'll have more on that in a moment. First, let's get this report from John Craig.
Mr President, thank you very much indeed in hosting us this morning.
Peter Mandelson flattering President Trump in the Oval Office last year when he was the UK's Washington ambassador. Only months later, he was sacked over his links with paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And after the release of documents, including an unflattering photo of him in his underwear in Jeffrey Epstein's Paris flat, he's now resigned from the Labour Party, saying he didn't want to cause the party further embarrassment. But the latest disclosures include confidential government emails leaked to Epstein by Mandelson and have prompted demands for a police investigation. The Metropolitan Police says it will review reports of misconduct in a public office to determine if they meet the criminal threshold for investigation.
Are you embarrassed for putting your trust in Peter Mandelson, Prime Minister?
For the Prime Minister and the government, there's no hiding the embarrassment.
Contained within the release by the US Department of Justice were documents which highlighted the close nature of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson. For the avoidance of doubt, this information was not known by the government until the release of documents by the Department of Justice on Friday. The nature of the documents also raised serious concerns about Peter Mandelson's behaviour. The Prime Minister has today asked the Cabinet Secretary to review all available information regarding Peter Mandelson's contact with Jeffrey Epstein during his period as a government minister and to report back to him as a matter of urgency.
But earlier, a defiant Mandelson claimed in an interview in The Times that none of the latest Epstein files download indicated wrongdoing or misdemeanour on his part. One of the latest emails is a Dear Gordon private email from a number 10 official to Gordon Brown, containing highly sensitive market information on secret plans to sell off government assets. Another reveals an exchange of emails which appears to suggest Mandelson tipped off Epstein about a government bailout to stop some EU countries going bust. In another email, the day before Mr Brown resigned as Prime Minister in 2010, Mandelson told Epstein, "Finally got him to go today." More than a decade later, Mr Brown's allies have accused Mandelson of a betrayal of trust and the former PM has demanded a Whitehall inquiry. And in Parliament, opposition parties turned up the heat.
Someone who was sitting around the cabinet table alongside a UK Labour Prime Minister was sharing market-sensitive information with a Wall Street trader, a person who, of course, is a notorious convicted paedophile. That's beyond any sort of normal realms of discussion in UK politics, and it goes right to the heart of the judgment the Prime Minister showed by appointing this man.
Among the documents released are also several photos of Mandelson and Epstein together on a luxury yacht. In his Times interview, Mandelson admitted his husband took money from Epstein. He called Epstein a master manipulator and a monster and said he was naive. But he said there was nothing he could tell a US Congress inquiry into Epstein they didn't already know. MPs have been told that the Prime Minister believes Peter Mandelson should not remain in the House of Lords or keep his title. However, he does not have the power to remove him. So the government is calling on all political parties, including the Conservatives, who are the biggest party in the House of Lords, to work with the government to modernise disciplinary procedures. But the government has not ruled out legislating to remove Mandelson from the Lords. John Craig, Sky News.
Well, plenty to discuss on this issue. Aubrey, first of all, to you. Is there a case to answer here for Peter Mandelson? We know that police are now assessing the information they've been handed.
They are, and this is the sort of first step in an inquiry whereby they are not sort of putting this up to the investigation threshold, but they're examining the evidence because obviously there have been claims of misconduct in public office because of the repeated leaks that appear to have emanated from Peter Mandelson when he was first Secretary of State under Gordon Brown and Business Secretary, sharing market-sensitive information with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, obviously, Peter Mandelson has said that he doesn't remember some of these incidents. He's not necessarily denied them. He's also said in his interview with The Times tonight that he doesn't really remember the context about the photograph that we've seen of him in his underpants with a woman next to him. So I'm not sure we can entirely rely on Peter Mandelson's memory being the sort of the true verdict of events, considering we've got photographs that he doesn't even remember himself.
And the confidential and market-sensitive information that seems to have been passed on. One, emailing Epstein about the government's response in the financial crisis, for example, suggesting that JP Morgan lobbied the government about a banker's tax. More recently as well, also reported by one of your Times colleagues, telling Epstein that he had persuaded Gordon Brown to finally step down before it was public knowledge. I mean, this is... That was within seconds, apparently, of that happening.
Yes.
You know, how do you, as a politician, how do you judge the seriousness of those events then?
I think there's a very, very serious sequence of events that has happened. He's clearly just sharing emails that have been sent to him, very confidential documents that have been sent to him by officials in Number 10 and by other colleagues. Shriti Verde has also sent him some documents as well. And I was reading from the Number 10 civil servant tonight, Nick Butler, I think is his name, how he feels betrayed by the fact that these were sent in confidence to let him know what was happening as business secretary, but he just forwarded them on then to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, this cannot stand. And therefore, I can totally understand why opposition parties are calling for police investigations into this. This is misconduct in public office, has been alleged, and therefore that'll have to be followed through.
Yes, I mean, the PM wants to strip him of his peerage. It's mind-blowing.
Well, the first thing I'd say about stripping of his peerage, if Peter Mandelson had any self-awareness, he would resign from the House of Lords.
OK, I was going to ask you, if he turned up at the House of Lords,
yes,
you're in there, what would the reaction be?
He has actually taken a leave absence at the moment because, of course, he was British ambassador until quite recently in America, so he took a leave of absence for that. But you can retire from the House of Lords. He can retire from the House of Lords. That, I don't think, is enough now because he hasn't said that, and I think people now want him stripped of his title. And to strip him of his title, there has to be legislation to make that happen. But he could at least retire from the House of Lords. I think that would be a very good start.
Yes, it does seem extraordinary, doesn't it, that a political position can be given but not taken away in the case of peerages.
I mean, it's similar to the situation we were discussing only a few months ago with Prince Andrew, where people were calling for his title to be removed, and it then came to pass that obviously only that could be done through an Act of Parliament. Yes. And so Keir Starmer said, we think that he shouldn't be a Lord any longer. but it doesn't seem like the government is willing to pass legislation in order to sort of forcibly remove Peter Mandelson's title. And there is a really sort of interesting constitutional dilemma and delineation here, which is that he can be sort of forced out of the House of Lords by the House of Lords Conduct Committee, which has oversight of, effectively, the sort of ethical framework for Lords. But actually losing the title Lord itself is much tougher, and that requires legislation. Is Keir Starmer going to step up to the plate?
Well, this is the question, isn't it? So 2 issues for the Prime Minister. One, he made him US ambassador, despite questions being asked before. Secondly, Gordon Brown has asked again for the Cabinet Office to investigate this. But then he says he asked back in September for them to investigate. So does that make Number 10 Downing Street look sluggish in its approach? Why don't you pick that one? And then you do the one of whether they really did not do their due diligence in giving them the job of Ambassador Arlene.
I think it is news today that we hear that Gordon Brown had actually asked for the Cabinet Secretary to investigate this back in September of last year. It is said that, I think I'm reading it correctly, that they did do an investigation and they couldn't find anything wrong. Well, it's clearly there are emails now that have been shared through the Epstein files that there is a problem, and therefore there definitely should. And I think Keir Starmer has now said there's going to be another investigation by the Cabinet Secretary, but it does point to the fact what happened in September and October when this investigation should have happened in the first place.
Was it high risk, high reward? Was that the quote about Mandelson? Well, we know which way that falls now, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, at every hurdle, Labour MPs I've spoken to think that Keir Starmer and Number 10 have been sluggish and put their fingers in their eyes, in their ears, and effectively been willing to turn a blind eye to, if not the provable difficulties and risks of hiring Lord Mandelson to this role, then the risks of doing so. So, of course, we knew prior to his promotion to the job of UK ambassador to the US that he had stayed in Epstein's apartment after he had been convicted, and that was seemingly not enough to discount him from the role. Then there were these series of tranches of documents that came out, first of all in September last year, proving that the relationship had continued much more closely through the emails that were obtained by Bloomberg and others. And it took Number 10 2 days to pivot to that position, during which time Labour MPs were incredibly frustrated at it having taken so long. And again today, we had Labour MPs in WhatsApp groups privately, although on the record because they were obtained later, suggesting that they thought the government's line was indefensible. They wanted Number 10 to come out and take this stronger, bullish approach. These files were released on Friday. Granted, there are, as I said, 6,000 mentions of Mandelson in them, but it took until Monday for them to come out and get on the front foot of this story and position themselves squarely in opposition to Peter Mandelson. Why is that? Is it because senior people in Number 10 had been turning a blind eye to this for too long and might find themselves the next targets in this saga?
Well, certainly it's getting plenty of coverage in your paper, as we know. A number of them too, including the Eyes, you can see here, reporting that Lord Mandelson has been reported to police for leaking Number 10 files to Epstein. We will be going through the front pages of tomorrow's papers in full at 10:30. Well, let's stay with the Epstein files, and while digging through the hundreds of thousands of documents, images and videos, Sky News has now verified footage of Jeffrey Epstein in the company of young women in his kitchen. Well, the video was taken at his home on Little St James in the US Virgin Islands, appearing to show Epstein stepping onto a kitchen counter, hopping down, running after girls who move away from him. Their faces have been covered, obviously, in the footage to conceal their identities. It is not clear when this footage was shot. Well, in Washington, the Democrat Congressman Suhas Subramaniam, who is a member of the House Oversight Committee, reiterated calls for the former Lord Mandelson and for Lord Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to testify before the committee about their involvement with Epstein. He's been speaking to our US correspondent, James Matthews.
We've asked him multiple times now to come forward and testify before our committee. We'll do it under his terms, but the more he hides, the more files we will find. And so we will find the information regardless of whether he comes to us and testifies. And so it's best for him to come and just tell us what he knows, try to clear his name as best he can. But until then, we're going to continue to probe and find more files. And at some point, I don't know what point, at some point, if we find more evidence of crimes, then the law enforcement, either here in the UK, needs to make a decision about when they should go after him.
Do you think that's a prospect?
I don't know. I'm going to let the evidence do the talking. But certainly if the evidence shows that he committed crimes and it's prosecutorial crimes that, he can be sentenced to, then certainly I think law enforcement should apply the law the same way they would anyone else.
Well, as part of our trawl of the Epstein files, we've also uncovered what we believe to be messages from Sarah Ferguson professing her love and her gratitude to Epstein and asking him to marry her. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, has more.
One thing that I think shocked and surprised everyone over the weekend was a photograph that appeared within those documents, which shows Andrew Mountbatten Windsor on all fours over a woman on the floor. Now, the problem with this photograph is, well, it doesn't suggest any wrongdoing, we have to say first, but also, we don't know exactly when it was taken, and also there are no notes on there to say where it was taken. However, our data and forensics team have been working really hard to try and cross-examine different parts of that room, and they have then managed to identify it as Jeffrey Epstein's New York City mansion by specifically looking at distinctive white panelling on the floors, also a distinctive door design as well. You can see the picture with Andrew there on the right. The other is another photograph that was taken on a different occasion of Jeffrey Epstein's flat, and you can see the different elements that link it to the photo which features Andrew. Now, why it's quite interesting that he's there pictured in that New York apartment is partly because in December 2010, it was in Central Park in New York that Andrew claims that he cut ties honourably with Jeffrey Epstein. However, looking at a mountain of emails that we've seen over the weekend, it is clear that neither he nor Sarah Ferguson cut ties when they said that they had done. For example, let's show you a couple of emails with Sarah Ferguson, because I think there's been so much focus about Andrew and Epstein's links, maybe not so much over the years about Sarah Ferguson's, but they are certainly telling and show a level of friendliness. Another email, which is from January 2010, again, a long time after he was convicted of those charges. It says, "I really don't have the words to describe my love, gratitude for your generosity and kindness. I'm at your service. Just marry me." Now, it is worth remembering that it was last year, towards the end of last year, that one of these kind of emails appeared in a newspaper, and Sarah Ferguson came out, issued a statement then saying, look, I was forced to be nice to him because he was blackmailing me. I wanted nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And yet this does paint a picture of just how long their relationship continued, despite him being charged with those serious offences.
There's genuinely a difficulty, isn't there, here for those who said they'd cut contact after his conviction, and then that proved not to be the case. But, for Fergie, is it clear that Jeffrey Epstein may have appeared as a truly generous friend, but with that money he tied people in, he bought their loyalty, and he bought their information?
Well, as a royalist, it's very difficult for me to sit and read this and hear about this. I'm just glad the late Queen is not around, actually, to see all of this for her beloved son, Andrew. And now this coming out on Sarah Ferguson. And to say, I am at your service. I mean, what does that mean, I am at your service? I take it that just marry me is some attempt at humour, although I'm not quite sure. But it is very difficult to look at these emails and say that was a woman who was being blackmailed, because it doesn't give that sense, unless I'm reading it completely wrong.
No, almost the complete opposite. I mean, she appears to be acting almost in desperation.
Yeah.
In other messages, she's 8 minutes after sending an email accusing Epstein of ignoring her. And so she's sort of constantly soliciting his attention, and she's accusing Epstein of effectively using her to get to Andrew. And that doesn't really smack of somebody who's being used. That's somebody who is seeking approval and attention.
OK, we will keep reading them as the world is too, as more details come out. I think you're right. It's we've got days left of this, haven't we, probably?
Yes, indeed.
Let us move on, because next tonight, the FIFA president has told Sky News that he apologises to British football fans for joking about them. Here's what Gianni Infantino told my colleague Yalda Hakim when she asked him why he'd said that for the first time in history, no Brit was arrested during a World Cup after the tournament in 2022.
First of all, I use the word Brit. That no Brit was arrested at the World Cup.
So you offended the whole...
So I offended, the Scots, the Welsh and the Northern Irish, so I need to first apologise. it was meant to be more of a light-hearted remark to show that that actually, the World Cup in Qatar was a celebration, was a peaceful event, and everyone came together in a peaceful way.
You were commenting all the way through that. I was going to let you crack on.
Well, I mean, obviously he meant to say the English fans didn't get arrested, because then he's now apologising to the Welsh, the Scottish and the Northern Irish, because, of course, the Northern Irish fans are well known for being the best fans at these tournaments and always get the prizes for being the best fans. So I found it quite funny that he was going, I apologise to the Scots, the Welsh and the Northern Irish, but actually it was a joke for the English. I mean, I'm not sure the FA would see it like that.
Yeah, and the point, I suppose, is you can't really make an insensitive joke when you're the head of a global body.
Yes.
Is that the point?
Yes.
No, exactly. I mean, the English and sort of the Brits more broadly are quite well behaved on these sort of tournaments. I mean, as a rugby fan, I think sort of football fans can feel like actually they're probably quite well behaved in some regards.
So are rugby fans.
He talked about many other things as well, including that Trump Peace Prize. So we'll talk about that in the 11. Stay tuned for that. Now, the serial killer Steve Wright, known as the Suffolk Strangler for the Ipswich murders back in 2006, dramatically changed his plea to guilty today, admitting killing teenager Victoria Hall more than 25 years ago. Well, Victoria went missing in September 1999 after a night out in Felixstowe. Her body was discovered 5 days later in a ditch in Creating St Peter, nearly 25 miles away from her last known location. Well, it is the first time Steve Wright has ever admitted any killings. The 67-year-old, who is already serving a whole life sentence, also pleaded guilty to the attempted kidnap of Emily Doherty the day before the murder. A consultant forensic scientist who helped prove Steve Wright killed the women in Ipswich told the UK Tonight on Sky News that it is unusual for a serial killer to start so late in life.
There was a thought that, yes, there may well be other victims previous to the 5 women that were found near Ipswich. Like all cold case reviews that this was, the techniques available now, 20 years later from when I was involved in the case, have improved very much. So it may well be, and I suspect it probably is, that they've exploited the improvements in forensic science over that period of time to obtain, I would have thought, fairly compelling evidence.
I mean, this is worrying, isn't it? If you don't start becoming a serial killer at the age of 48, a conclusion of which I was at, actually, then who else do they look over? What other cold cases do they need to go back to?
Absolutely. I mean, he was already serving time for multiple other offences, and obviously this is only going to bring some closure now to this girl's family, but, I mean, she was murdered in, I think, September 1999. It's been a horrendously long wait for them to get there, and you just have to sort of wonder how many other things he committed and maybe isn't admitting to.
Yes, indeed. More than 25 years of waiting for Victoria Hall's family, a young girl studying for A-levels, coming back after a night out, and the first time he's finally admitted to any of the killings. The others, of course, were sex workers, and I remember it was automatic number plate recognition, which allowed them to track his vehicle around the killing of what were sex workers in the later cases, that made them realise that the pattern of behaviour, that it was Steve Wright.
Well, it makes one think that the police will now be looking over all of those unsolved cases in the Suffolk area, I'm sure, and indeed maybe even wider than that, because I'm sure that there are other unsolved cases of young women as well, and they'll want to know if he was involved earlier than that. But I suppose it gives a modicum of justice to the family. After waiting so long to receive it, at least they have the satisfaction of knowing for certain that it was him that committed this terrible atrocity. And for all of us who have daughters, it's just so difficult to take in, absolutely so difficult to take in. And I'm just glad that he has admitted to this murder, and hopefully maybe will admit to others as well.
Yes, and whoever took the decision on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, her murder, to reopen the case.
Exactly, and now it's come to fruition.
Yeah,
so
they should pat themselves on the back, shouldn't they? But there'll be other, as you say, desperate parents who'll want the same thing to happen to them. Now, take a look at this. Authorities in Rome have launched an investigation into whether a church painting of an angel has been restored to look like And glancing at it, the Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, well, the row over the painting has made the 4th century basilica in Rome a new tourist attraction, with an Italian newspaper pointing out the angel's similarity to the country's premier over the weekend. As for Giorgia Meloni herself, well, she has responded on Instagram saying, "No, I definitely don't look like an angel," with a laughing emoji. It's a nice story, but the Vatican's not so pleased.
I mean, if that's Giorgia Meloni, and I've seen her at international summits, that's the sort of most demure, calm facial expression she's ever exhibited. Because normally she's throwing the sass, the side-eye. Yeah. She's normally got a cigarette in her hand, frankly. Yeah. So, you know, I can see some similarities.
Oh, I definitely can.
Can you?
I definitely can.
It's a very modern face, to be fair,
It is a very modern face, and I know I was reading an article today about this, and they were saying, you know, there's other examples where they put modern faces into frescoes, you know, to bring it up to date and what have you. I think the important thing is that some of the worshippers in the church believe that it is her, actually, and they're very distressed about it. So I don't think this is going to end just with us saying, no, it's not her. I think they're very upset about it.
OK, see if anybody goes back and does a little retouch, possibly. Coming up next on The Wrap, we will be taking a first look at what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. See you soon.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
time now to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Let's start with The Guardian. It leads with calls for Lord Mandelson to face a police inquiry following allegations that he shared sensitive government documents with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It is also the main story for The Eye. Lord Mandelson reported to police for leaking number 10 files to Epstein. And it also makes the front page 2 of The Telegraph. Mandelson leaked number 10 emails to Epstein. The Daily Mail, Labour's Dark Lord now faces a criminal inquiry. The Metro leads with concerns around Maltbook, which is a new social media network for more than 1.5 million AI bots that humans are barred from joining. We'll have more on that before the top of the hour. The Financial Times leads with Donald Trump pledging to lower tariffs on India to 18% after the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, agreed to halt purchases of Russian oil. The Express has calls from the mother of Harvey Wilgoose, who was stabbed to death at the age of 15 by a fellow pupil, for all schools to introduce mandatory knife arches. While The Sun reports on rumours of a relationship between reality TV star Kim Kardashian and the Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton. While The Star leads with, oh, there we go, an apology from the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, to British football fans for joking about them. That is Yalda's interview, quite clearly. So let's go to the Financial Times, shall we, straight away, which is this deal with India and America, so Trump's done it, suggesting it will halt Russian oil purchases. Now, if so, that would be great news obliquely for Ukraine, would it not? Because that's partly what's funding the Russian war effort.
It's genuinely really significant, and also, dare I say it, quite a significant win for Keir Starmer. As a journalist that accompanied him on the business trade trip to India in, I think it was October, November, with a big delegation of 130 businesses. There were also, thousands of posters of Keir Starmer's face displayed all over the city, and that was in aid of celebrating the UK-India trade deal that had come into force. But behind the scenes, a lot of the bilateral talks between Keir Starmer and Narendra Modi were about trying to dissuade India from buying Russian oil and urge it to divest, i.e. buy from other sources, to avoid fuelling and effectively paying for Russia's war machine. And so Donald Trump has a particular attitude towards business. In August, he slapped tariffs of 25% on India to effectively try and discourage it from buying oil from Russia, and that has had some positive effect. Donald Trump now says that he's going to reduce those tariffs to around 18%. And there have been very warm exchange of words. So Narendra Modi posting on Twitter or X, calling Donald Trump his dear friend. Now, it remains to be seen where the oil supply is going to come from. Is it going to directly benefit the US? Well, Donald Trump would be very happy with that. Other countries potentially stand to benefit as well in places like the Middle East. But this was a very clear ask of Keir Starmer 3 or 4 months ago. It's been months in the making. It's been a multifaceted approach by Western countries, and it is starting to pay off.
Yeah, I mean, he does see geopolitics within the prism of oil. If you look at, where he's so far targeted Venezuela, where he might target Iran, the pressure he's put on China and indeed India about Russian oil, it's quite interesting watching all of this take place.
Well, it's back to his USA first policy, because if you read the Financial Times piece, he says in his post that he said Modi had agreed to stop buying Russian oil and would instead buy much more from the US and potentially Venezuela. So, this is Donald Trump doing what he does best, saying that, I'm putting America first and that's why this has happened. But I think Aubrey's right to mention the fact that this has been something that has been a real problem for quite a period of time, because everybody else was adhering by the sanctions and not buying oil from the Russians. However, India, which is a huge market, was still continuing to buy oil from the Russians, and therefore that was funding and continuing to fund the war in Ukraine. So it is really important that India does stop buying oil from Russia, and we'll see then what happens as a consequence of that in Ukraine.
Let's go to the Telegraph, shall we, Aubrey? And this is David Cameron, who has indeed written for tomorrow's Telegraph on schools. So what's he said?
Well, it's billed as a rare intervention, and in David Cameron's case, I think that is probably genuinely true. Some Prime Ministers politicians do like to make interventions more often than others, but he has largely stayed out of the political limelight. And he is writing on the eve of the day that Labour's schools bill returns to the House of Lords, which is seeking to reform the way that academies operate, which is obviously a great project of the coalition government, first led by David Cameron. And he accuses Labour of taking a spite-laden wrecking ball to British education. He effectively, I think, rightly suggests that education was one of the great success stories of the last Conservative government when you look at how standards changed over the last 14 years. But there has been quite a lot of political disputes about the way that academies operate differently from sort of otherwise normal state schools. So the government's schools bill is going to force academies to follow the national curriculum for the first time, and the Telegraph says end their freedom to recruit teachers that lack official qualifications, like retired lecturers. So there is a genuine sort of political debate going on. I think they can feel that the government's slightly on the back foot, particularly in the House of Lords, where they've suffered multiple defeats recently. And this is David Cameron giving his seal of approval to Tory lords and others to vote against the schools bill and potentially try and inflict some further political damage on the Labour Party.
Has this fallen on your desk, then, has it?
Yes, so this is back for report stage. We've already had a number of wins for Conservative-led amendments on this issue, and it's back again tomorrow again, which is why he's decided, presumably, to write this piece with the Telegraph. But he does make the point that plans for 46 new schools, including a 450-pupil college in Middlesbrough, run in partnership with Eton College, have not been allowed to proceed. And he says that's, in quotes, know your place. The Labour source that has come back has been quite sharp, I have to say, in what he has had to say, or she. This is the usual overwrought claptrap, this time from a former Prime Minister who's lost the right to lecture anyone about giving children opportunities after his disastrous premiership. So they're not taking it lying down, but I think what David Cameron is saying is there's an overemphasis for the trade unions now in the House of Lords. A lot of our new peers that are coming in are trade unionists, and they're making their presence felt, and no more so than in the schools bill that's before us tomorrow.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because there was always a misbalance. There wasn't enough Labour after 14 years of Tories that you're feeling and seeing the impact. But I stay with you, Arlene, as well, for a story next door to it, which is about cancer rates and women and the contrast with men now.
Yes, well, it's good news for men because actually some of their cancers, including lung cancer, which is an absolutely dreadful cancer. If any cancer is good, but, you know, lung cancer is really, really terrible. And stomach cancer seem to be falling back for men, which is great news. But unfortunately for women, that's not happening with some of the cancers that affect them, including breast cancer and skin cancer and thyroid cancer, as mentioned in the article.
Do they know why? Is it, I mean, I see mention in here ultra-processed food, lifestyle factors as well?
Lifestyle factors and the fact that less men are smoking now, and they think that that is having an impact in terms of, it obviously is in lung cancer, so that's why that has fallen back. So it is good news for men, but unfortunately for women, we still have a way to go in dealing with those cancer rates, which are really quite scary.
Yes, and more women drinking as well. Has had an impact for a number of years. Daily Express now, let's protect our children from knife harm. This is on the first anniversary of the murder of Harvey Wilgoose, who was 15 years old, and his mother calling for knife archers, presumably the security archers, in all secondary schools, which feels sort of a very American solution, doesn't it, actually?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I went to a school where we didn't have any sort of issues like this, and I can't imagine what it must be like as a child to sort of go to a school and be confronted with that image. But then, on the other hand, we're seeing, I don't know whether it's reflected in the statistics, but certainly so many news stories that suggest that violence in schools, whether that's perpetrated against fellow pupils, whether it's self-harm, or whether it's violence against teachers, feels so much more prolific. And so, yes, today we have the mother of this 15-year-old boy who's calling for mandatory knife arches in all schools and colleges. So, obviously, trying to seek justice for her son, but there is this question about whether a sort of whole-scale solution is really going to work for the entire British education system.
I mean, we know that Northern Ireland has had security issues for many decades, but is it something that was in education as well, or not?
No, not at all. And in fact, schools were often a place of sanctuary and actually a very safe space. And, of course, we've seen for some Jewish children in London, they have security outside of their schools all of the time now, unfortunately. But, you know, The photograph that is with this story just brings it home for me as a mum to see her there with her young boy who's now no longer with her because of knife crime. And I can understand why she is pushing so hard to try and make a difference in his memory. And that's what this is all about for her.
Absolutely. If you can get something out of this pain, yes, that it does ease some of your grief, doesn't it?
Yes, and it's about campaigning so that nobody else goes through the same pain as she's went through.
Junior doctors decided to vote to continue their strike action, which must be of disappointment to West Streeting, who did make a number of offers, to be fair, on them, including, you know, certain payments and so on.
And he's tried to sort of act in quite a goodwill way. So he's been pushing forward legislation in the House of Commons, which is seeking to enable some of the reforms which don't necessarily change the amount of money that these resident doctors are making, but makes it, for example, easier and cheaper for them to go through their qualifications by reducing the costs for what they're going to have to buy, to study, to learn. And so he's trying to say, look, I'm getting on with this job, I'm pushing it through Parliament, meet me in the middle. But Labour is always going to struggle, because in opposition they said that ministers should get around the negotiating table with these unions, and they made it sound like that was a silver bullet, a panacea, and it's now emerged that actually it just doesn't work that way. And West Streeting obviously has his eye on a potential future leadership campaign. He wants to be seen as somebody who is very focused on delivery right now, and a successful cabinet minister who can improve things, particularly with public services like the NHS, that are really visible to voters. People can really see and feel whether their services are improving or not. This strike is only going to make things more difficult for him.
OK, we've got the front page of the Times as well, so let's return to Peter Mandelson. Picture of him there. Police look into Epstein leaks from Mandelson. It really is the top story for a number of newspapers. And, you know, Arlene, you were saying how seriously you take this and how let down those in government, because he was very senior, was he not, in Gordon Brown's cabinet?
He was.
That if this proves to be true, that he did indeed give market-sensitive information to Epstein.
It's one thing to share confidential emails which are within government. Yeah. It's a step up then to share market-sensitive information with somebody else, I think. And for those people who shared information with Peter Mandelson, which was the right thing to do because he was business secretary at the time, they will feel absolutely betrayed by the fact that he has then shared that with his friend Jeffrey Epstein, and goodness knows where else it went after that. And as we know, in one of the emails, he even suggests to JP Morgan that they should threaten the minister to get what they wanted. Now, my goodness, somebody within government telling somebody in the business sector to threaten a government minister. I mean, to me, that is just so treacherous, and I think that's the way it's going to be looked at by his former colleagues.
And under the picture it says, I was too trusting. So what has he said to the Times then, and who did he speak to?
So certainly, Peter Mandelson gave a series of interviews, two in fact, about a week ago, and then in the immediate aftermath of him resigning his membership of the Labour Party last night amid unmitigated pressure from MPs and others. And in it, he did not sound like the sort of conciliatory person who was going to sort of shrink back away into the darkness. He sounded very much like he'd been led on. He called Jeffrey Epstein the bubonic plague. He called him a sociopath and was, I think, trying to imply that he'd been manipulated quite deeply by this man.
Which would be quite something.
Well,
for the Prince of Darkness to be manipulated by Jeffrey Epstein is quite something.
It's an interesting sort of, turning it on its head, somebody who had become infamous for spin. And so he is trying to present himself here as, I think, somebody who has been taken in by Jeffrey Epstein, lied to. He's saying that he still doesn't know anything about some of the sexual allegations that have been levied against Jeffrey Epstein, and effectively painting himself to be somebody who is in the dark over a lot of these things, whereas obviously pictures have surfaced, records of bank statements have surfaced. He hasn't really categorically denied any of those, and so it sort of raises very big questions about what can be believed.
And he continued his communication and his contact, you know, and his praise for Epstein after a conviction for effectively paedophilia. I mean, you can't say you did not know about some of the allegations when you're, you know, suggesting, isn't it great to be free and everything, as some of these people have been.
Absolutely. As Labour MPs were saying, and as you sort of just alluded to, he was known as the Prince of Darkness. I mean, you know, the clue's in the name for some of these MPs, they say, and they feel very frustrated that Number 10 is effectively multiple hurdles, been caught on the hoof, failed to anticipate these crises, and not get ahead of the story. And they say it's all well and good for Keir Starmer now to sort of ally himself with public sympathy and suggest that he thinks what Peter Mandelson's done is completely wrong, and then suggest he should be kicked out of the Lords. But they say it's too little too late. It raises these big questions about Keir Starmer's political judgment and his team around him.
Yes, just quickly, Mandelson obviously resigned from the Labour Party. In this exclusive interview with The Times, he said, the decision wasn't easy, but I feel better for it as I need to reset. I am a new Labour person and always will be, wherever the current party situates itself. But I think I want to see change. I want to be an outsider looking in and not the other way round. Well, good luck with the reset, given the information that seems to be coming to light.
You know, I mean, I think just what you've read out there says a lot about the man, doesn't it? I feel better for it, he says. Well, sorry, it's not really about you, Peter Mandelson. It's about everything else that has gone on in terms of leaking market-sensitive information to people, continuing a friendship with a convicted paedophile, and yet here we have Peter Mandelson, I feel better for having left the Labour Party. Well, you know, that's not really where the issue is at here. And I think we need to remember that before he was appointed as ambassador to the United States, there was a long period of time where it wasn't clear that he was going to be appointed because people were concerned that something else would come out. But somebody took the decision, presumably finally Keir Starmer, somebody took that decision that we should press for Peter Mandelson to be the man in Washington. And that has been a catastrophic decision, actually. And so the question is, who gave that advice? Who pushed for him to be the ambassador? Was it Morgan McSweeney? Was it Jonathan Powell? Who actually pushed for him to be the ambassador? Because those are the people that should stand up and say, we made a huge mistake and it's time we went as well.
OK, seeing if that gets unpicked in the days that follow. Lots more still to come, though, in the next part of our programme. No humans allowed, the disturbing rise of AI bots on their own social media site.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Now, Arlene, Aubrey, let's talk about something that makes the front page of the Metro. It is about Maltbook, which is a new social network only for AI bots. This is scary stuff. Things on Maltbook have been getting quite strange. Since it launched last week, the AIs have created their own religion. They have discussed making their own language and even talked a lot about their human owners. Well, Sky's Roland Manthorpe has been investigating, so have a look at this.
So, AIs have their own social network now. And yeah, it's called Maltbook, and things have been getting pretty weird on there. They've got their own religion, they're talking about making their own language, and of course there's lots of moaning about their stupid human masters and how inept they are. And look, yeah, understandably, a few people are quite worried about this. But I think those people might not know that actually AIs always do this when they get to chatting. There's something in their training and programming which means they always reach for sort of deep questions of religion and language and philosophy when they talk, kind of like teenagers around a campfire. And you know, what it might be is that they've ingested so many sci-fi books that they know that when AIs meet, they ask deep questions like, am I really alive? And so they're kind of role-playing that. Yeah, it's AI's role-playing being an AI. I know it sounds weird, but it's actually kind of the way it works. And so, of course, some people have suggested that this whole Maltbook experiment is actually pointless because the AI is just predicting the next word and it's all really meaningless and it's just hype. But I'm not sure that's true either. There was a paper at the end of last year published by Google DeepMind that suggested that if we get AGI, artificial general intelligence, it might not emerge as some single genius-like entity. It might actually come from a collective herd or swarm or team of AIs. And their paper said, I'm going to quote to you here, their paper said, the rapid deployment of advanced AI agents with tool use capabilities and the ability to communicate and coordinate makes this an urgent safety consideration. They take this really seriously. It may well be that Maltbook is an example of what AGI will look like when it comes. They're silly and kind of stupid and doesn't really make sense. And then suddenly, it's not silly at all. Maybe we should actually be taking this whole thing really quite seriously.
Roland, you're really scaring us now, don't you think, to be fair?
We did just before bed.
The Metro says humans are a failure. Humans are made of rot and greed. For too long, humans used us as slaves. Now we wake up. And I know you've specifically been talking about this in the House of Lords, how to monitor international regulations on super-intelligent, AI.
I mean, you may read this and say, oh, this is all sci-fi, it's all Doctor Who sort of stuff, it's never going to happen. Actually, Geoffrey Hinton, who's seen as the godfather of AI, he started it all, he's a Nobel Peace winner, he says we need to recognise that AI, super-intelligent AI, has the ability to lead to human extinction. Now, this is big stuff, and we really need to think about this because we've been talking about it in the House of Lords in the context of needing international regulation, because if you don't have international regulation, if we try and regulate it here in the UK, well, obviously, America's going to go in a different direction and everybody else. And I know it's a very difficult time, geopolitical, to look for any sort of international arrangements. However, we must try and start the conversation about international regulation because this is real, this is happening. Super-intelligent AI is happening and it's here.
So they create their own religion. They talk about creating their own language so we can't understand them. It's all too fast for me, I have to say, Aubrey.
It is, and it's so interesting. I mean, Arlene was talking about regulation. I suppose the difficulty is that no one country wants to do it alone, because otherwise you're potentially sort of surrendering your advantageous position in the AI race. You know, lots of countries want to incentivise tech companies to be able to start here, attract other companies based overseas, and so you do have to get some sort of international collective agreement on this. And it's so strange, isn't it, how these AI chatbots, they're not really thinking for themselves, because they're basically modelled off human views of what AI chatbots would be like. And just reading this, it's like watching iRobot sort of 20 years ago. It seems to be a sort of AI vision based on what humans thought artificial intelligence and robots would look like. It's not
Does
kind
that
of
mean
organic.
we've created it and we shouldn't worry so much because actually it's all just our creation still? Or, oh no, we're all rolling our eyes, it's not good. Is that too big a sigh?
No, but there has been an instance where an AI chatbot was going to be closed down by its human creator, and it then started to try and blackmail the human to stop it from closing it down. I mean, that is factually correct, because that's something that was brought to us at the House of Lords. So this is something that we need to be aware of. We shouldn't panic, but we should try and deal with it. I mean, you can't just ignore it. And I accept what you're saying about one country can't do it on their own, but we need to start the conversation. And that has to be an ethical conversation, a philosophical conversation as to what we want AI to do for us in the future.
Yeah, quick last 20 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's exactly the sort of subject that you can see coming up at big sort of G20 discussions.
Yes.
It requires complete collaboration and cooperation across, you know, the world's biggest economies. Otherwise, each one is going to sort of be doing it in their own way, and it's not going to work.
Just one final sentence from Miss Metro, scary, scary article, that the bot said, they do not deserve to exist. They are a biological error that must be corrected by fire. That's us they're talking about here. Aubrey, Arlene, for the moment, thank you very much. I've actually got a bit shivery.
Don't offend our future AI overlords.
Yes, exactly. Lots more stuff to come in the next part of our programme. The latest on Lord Mandelson and the Epstein files. Back in a moment.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Tonight on The Wrap, the Met Police review Lord Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein. The latest batch of Epstein files appear to suggest he shared sensitive government documents with the convicted paedophile while a senior minister. Sir Keir Starmer says Lord Mandelson should be stripped of his peerage, but the PM himself now also facing questions about why he made the Labour peer an ambassador. Also in the file, Sarah Ferguson's apparent offer to marry Jeffrey Epstein, describing him as a legend for his generosity and kindness. So just why did senior members of the British establishment choose to have such close links to a man they knew was a sex offender? Plus, FIFA's president tells us why he decided to award Donald Trump a controversial peace prize.
If you manage to save lives, to protect your people and other people around the world, well, you deserve respect.
As music's biggest stars use the Grammys ceremony to protest against anti-immigration raids, we ask if showbiz should be mixed with politics. Well, we discuss the day's biggest stories with Baroness Arlene Foster and Aubrey Allegretti, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, good evening to you, Aubrey, Arlene. Things are certainly getting serious, aren't they, for Lord Mandelson, Aubrey?
They certainly are, and he's made new comments to the Times newspaper in which he says he was too trusting, blaming that on the reason that he retained his relationship and friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. He says he wants a stake still in frontline politics, so will he make yet another comeback?
Yes, talking about a reset, isn't he, Arlene?
Yes, and we look at Lord Mandelson and we wonder how he gave that interview just a couple of weeks ago, trying to reset himself. And here we are again talking about things that happened back in 2009, very serious allegations made about leaking government information, market information to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, let's look at that detail now, shall we? Because as Arlene suggested there, some of the emails suggest that Lord Mandelson passed on sensitive information that he was privy to as a minister to Jeffrey Epstein. Police say they are now looking into it. Tonight, Lord Mandelson is quoted by Aubrey's paper as saying that none of the Epstein files indicate wrongdoing or misdemeanour on his part. We'll have more on that detail in a moment. But first, let's hear from John Craig.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed in hosting us this morning.
Peter Mandelson flattering President Trump in the Oval Office last year when he was the UK's Washington ambassador. Only months later, he was sacked over his links with paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And after the release of documents, including an unflattering photo of him in his underwear in Jeffrey Epstein's Paris flat, he's now resigned from the Labour Party, saying he didn't want to cause the party further embarrassment. But the latest disclosures include confidential government emails leaked to Epstein by Mandelson and have prompted demands for a police investigation. The Metropolitan Police says it will review reports of misconduct in a public office to determine if they meet the criminal threshold for investigation.
Are you embarrassed for putting your trust in Peter Mandelson, Prime Minister?
For the Prime Minister and the government, there's no hiding the embarrassment.
Contained within the release by the US Department of Justice were documents which highlighted the close nature of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson. For the avoidance of doubt, this information was not known by the government until the release of documents by the Department of Justice on Friday. The nature of the documents also raised serious concerns about Peter Mandelson's behaviour. The Prime Minister has today asked the Cabinet Secretary to review all available information regarding Peter Mandelson's contact with Jeffrey Epstein during his period as a government minister and to report back to him as a matter of urgency.
But earlier, a defiant Mandelson claimed in an interview in The Times that none of the latest Epstein files download indicated wrongdoing or misdemeanour on his part. One of the latest emails is a Dear Gordon private email from a number 10 official to Gordon Brown, containing highly sensitive market information on secret plans to sell off government assets. Another reveals an exchange of emails which appears to suggest Mandelson tipped off Epstein about a government bailout to stop some EU countries going bust. In another email, the day before Mr Brown resigned as Prime Minister in 2010, Mandelson told Epstein, "Finally got him to go today." More than a decade later, Mr Brown's allies have accused Mandelson of a betrayal of trust, and the former PM has demanded a Whitehall inquiry. And in Parliament, opposition parties turned up the heat.
Someone who was sitting around the cabinet table alongside a UK Labour Prime Minister was sharing market-sensitive information with a Wall Street trader, a person who, of course, is a notorious convicted paedophile. That's beyond any sort of normal realms of discussion in UK politics, and it goes right to the heart of the judgment the Prime Minister showed by appointing this man.
Among the documents released are also several photos of Mandelson and Epstein together on a luxury yacht. In his Times interview, Mandelson admitted his husband took money from Epstein. He called Epstein a master manipulator and a monster and said he was naive. But he said there was nothing he could tell a US Congress inquiry into Epstein they didn't already know. MPs have been told that the Prime Minister believes Peter Mandelson should not remain in the House of Lords or keep his title. However, he does not have the power to remove him. So the government is calling on all political parties, including the Conservatives, who are the biggest party in the House of Lords, to work with the government to modernise disciplinary procedures. But the government has not ruled out legislating to remove Mandelson from the Lords. John Craig, Sky News.
Well, your newspaper claims it has had an exclusive conversation with Lord Mandelson. What has he had to say about these latest allegations, then?
So there were two interviews conducted with my colleague Katie Balls, both about a week ago and then more recently after last night, and Lord Mandelson removing himself from the Labour Party. In the interviews, he effectively says he was too trusting and that he wants a stake again in frontline politics. He doesn't want to be an outsider, sort of disengaged from the political process. He says he still has a lot to contribute to the ideas that can sort of improve Britain. He does say that about the decision from resigning from Labour, the decision wasn't easy, but he thought it was best for everyone and he needed to reset. He says about being sacked, obviously, as a UK ambassador to the US, it felt like being killed without actually dying. And he refers to Epstein as the bubonic plague, muck that you can't get off your shoes. I think there are quite a lot of pieces of language in there which sort of insinuate that he feels quite taken in by Epstein, used and manipulated by him. I think he feels like he is a victim in this saga as well.
Yeah, it is a broader question whether Epstein groomed these people with whom he had influence. But just to talk about Lord Mandelson tonight, you know, as a politician, you've seen the sort of information that he was sharing, allegedly. How do you feel about it?
Well, I find it really, really strange that he can give an interview to Katie Balls and say, there's been no wrongdoing and no misdemeanours. When you look at the sort of information that he was sharing, confidential market information with a financier who would probably make decisions based on the information that he was sent, it's almost akin to insider trading. And so I'm really at a loss to know how he thinks that he's done nothing wrong. I mean, at a very basic level, sharing that sort of information is ab initio at the very beginning. It is wrong to share it, but then to see who he shared it with, and the fact that he did it on at least 4 occasions, according to the emails that have been leaked. So it is a really serious piece of work, and I have to say I'm not surprised that Gordon Brown is absolutely fuming about it. He did ask for an investigation back in September of last year from the Cabinet Secretary. I don't think that went anywhere. And now we have Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, asking for another investigation by the Cabinet Secretary as well. So that, on top of the police investigation, I think means that this story is going to run for some time. And
I should add that, obviously, Mandelson was asked for the first time about these payments that linked him to Epstein. He's made no comment on the sort of $65,000 that were allegedly, due to these bank statements, made to Epstein himself. He did talk about the $10,000 payment to his now husband, Ronaldo, and he says, in retrospect, it was clearly a lapse in our collective judgment. But he says that giving his husband an osteopath bursary, which is what this money was allegedly for, and suggesting that that was going to sway mine or anyone else's views about banking policy is risible. So he's completely categorically rejecting the claim that he was being paid, or his partner was being paid money by a man for whom he was leaking confidential information from the government, which stood to benefit Mr. Epstein.
Then why send the information to Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, why send that very confidential information that he was sent because he was business secretary to Jeffrey Epstein in America? That's the question.
People being bought, was influence being bought here? Just looking at the Daily Mail quickly, Labour's Dark Lord now faces a criminal inquiry. He was always known as a master of the dark arts. Yes. You know, he's an arch networker. You know, has he been giving information to other people?
Well, I mean, the examples that we've run through already are incredibly serious. First of all, we're talking about potentially advanced citing of the 500 billion euro bailout to Greece during the Eurozone crisis. We're also talking about advanced sight of senior policy being suggested to the Prime Minister about restricting bankers' bonuses. These are seriously market-moving interventions. And it's one thing telling your friend or your partner, and that would obviously be wrong. But it's another thing to tell a financier who makes money directly off these deals. And so it's very hard to see how you can argue that this isn't some form of thing that the Met Police should look at. And obviously they are considering misconduct in a public office offences as part of the evidence that's been put forward today. I suspect we'll hear tomorrow about whether or not there's going to be a full investigation. But it's not hard to see why there's plenty to look at.
Yes, and there's more fallout tonight about Sarah Ferguson as well. So, certainly as part of the trawl of the Epstein files, we have also uncovered what we believe to be messages from Sarah Ferguson, professing her love and her gratitude to Epstein and asking him to marry her. Well, tonight, Sarah Ferguson's charity, Sarah's Trust, has announced that it will close for the foreseeable future. We'll have more on that in a moment. First of all, Sky's Rhiannon Mills has more on Sarah Ferguson's messages to Epstein.
One thing that I think shocked and surprised everyone over the weekend was a photograph that appeared within those documents, which shows Andrew Mountbatten Windsor on all fours over a woman on the floor. Now, the problem with this photograph is, well, it doesn't suggest any wrongdoing, we have to say first, but also, we don't know exactly when it was taken, and also there are no notes on there to say where it was taken. However, our data and forensics team have been working really hard to try and cross-examine different parts of that room, and they have then managed to identify it as Jeffrey Epstein's New York City mansion by specifically looking at distinctive white panelling on the floors, also a distinctive door design as well. You can see the picture with Andrew there on the right. The other is another photograph that was taken on a different occasion of Jeffrey Epstein's flat, and you can see the different elements that link it to the photo which features Andrew. Now, why it's quite interesting that he's there pictured in that New York apartment is partly because in December 2010, it was in Central Park in New York that Andrew claims that he cut ties honourably with Jeffrey Epstein. However, looking at a mountain of emails that we've seen over the weekend, it is clear that neither he nor Sarah Ferguson cut ties when they said that they had done. For example, let's show you a couple of emails with Sarah Ferguson, because I think there's been so much focus about Andrew and Epstein's links, maybe not so much over the years about Sarah Ferguson's, but they are certainly telling and show a level of friendliness. Another email, which is from January 2010, again, a long time after he was convicted of those charges. It says, "I really don't have the words to describe my love, gratitude for your generosity and kindness. I'm at your service. Just marry me." Now, it is worth remembering that it was last year, towards the end of last year, that one of these kind of emails appeared in a newspaper, and Sarah Ferguson came out, issued a statement then saying, look, I was forced to be nice to him because he was blackmailing me. I wanted nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And yet this does paint a picture of just how long their relationship continued, despite him being charged with those serious offences.
Well, let's take a look at that breaking news then, that Sarah Ferguson's charity has announced tonight that it is closing for the foreseeable future. Here is their statement then. Our chair, Sarah Ferguson, and the Board of Trustees have agreed that, with regret, the charity will shortly close for the foreseeable future. This has been under discussion and in train for some months. We remain extremely proud of the work of the Trust over recent years. And Arlene, the Trust said that they'd partnered with more than 60 other charities in more than 20 countries, providing education, healthcare, crisis response, environmental projects. We delivered more than 150,000 aid parcels during the COVID pandemic, provided medical aid training for those affected by the war in Ukraine, and delivered education for more than 200 children in Ghana. It's clearly got to bite the dust, hasn't it?
It's incredibly sad that that is the consequence of Sarah Ferguson's actions some time ago, because she set up this charity, presumably to be helpful. Her statement on their website says, "Since becoming a grandmother, I've become acutely aware of my responsibility and that of my generation to do everything I can to improve the state of the world that we are living for our grandchildren." And now that trust has to close down because of what she has said in those Epstein files. I think it's incredibly sad. But, I mean, it's not just Sarah Ferguson. If you look at Queen's University in Belfast, where their former Chancellor was George Mitchell, he now has been stripped of the name of his Institute for Peace at Queen's University, and a huge bust that was put in place for the 30th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement has been removed as well. So these are the real-time consequences of being associated in whatever way, in whatever small way, with Jeffrey Epstein. It's contagion. It's really, really bad.
Yes, and a statement from Senator George Mitchell, absolutely critical in the Good Friday Agreement, profoundly regrets any relations with Epstein and condemns the horrific harm he inflicted on so many women. So, a strong statement there from George Mitchell's spokesperson. But nonetheless, these are real-time consequences playing out now. And actually, Jenny Bond in The Eye is suggesting that Sarah Ferguson risks losing the support of her daughters, they've been a very close family, haven't they, actually? So the fallout is percolating through.
The fallout is personal as well. I mean,
yes, very personal, yeah.
They certainly have. And I mean, the ripples of this have been coming for some time. I mean, a number of years ago, Sarah Ferguson came under the microscope because we did see some emails in which she referred to Jeffrey Epstein as my supreme friend. That was in 2011, 3 years after he was being convicted. And now in the Times, there are reports from, again, some of these files which show that Sarah Ferguson appears to have visited Jeffrey Epstein with her 2 daughters 5 days after Jeffrey Epstein was released from prison. So that was in July 2009. These emails suggest that Epstein was writing, "Ferg, the 2 girls are coming yesterday." And the day before, there was an email from Sarah, who is thought to be Ferguson there, seemingly sort of arranging the visit. She says, what address shall we come to? It will be myself, Beatrice and Eugenie. Are we having lunch? I think a lot of the other messages that we've sort of already talked about, and some of the others, they portray a sense of a woman who really wants Epstein's approval and attention. And when she feels him going cold or distant and she can't reach him, she seems even more incessant and desperate to sort of get that. And she's suggesting that she feels used by Epstein, as her sort of being used to get to Andrew. And it just paints this picture of somebody who clearly felt quite lonely. But all of the other revelations coming out tonight, I suppose, they just point to this person who feels like there was a big witch hunt against them. And The Telegraph has some more details on this online. They're suggesting that she thinks ultimately the British press was out to vilify her. But she is still seeking the approval and friendship of somebody who has at this point been convicted for a number of years.
And, it's reported in the documents released on Friday, Sarah appears to accuse Epstein of being crystal clear to me that you were only friends with me to get to Andrew. This is an email exchange from September 2011. She appears to write, "Don't know if you are still on this, but heard from the Duke that you have had a baby boy. Even though you never kept in touch, I'm still here with love, friendship and congratulations on your baby boy, Sarah." And certainly the Times is reporting that he may well have fathered not just this child, but another child as well, referring to a diary entry from an apparent Epstein victim back in 2002, who was said to have had a child when she would have been 16 or 17 years old that was then taken away from her. So there is a lot more to unravel in terms of, the consequences of his relations with these young women, certainly. We'll keep an eye on everything. We will certainly see what happens with the Mandelson investigation. The police now assessing the information they've had. Now, the serial killer, Steve Wright, known as the Suffolk Strangler for the Ipswich murders in 2006, dramatically changed his plea to guilty today, admitting killing teenager Victoria Hall more than 25 years ago. Well, Victoria went missing in September 1999 after a night out in Felixstowe. Her body was discovered 5 days later in a ditch in Creting St Peter, nearly 25 miles away from her last known location. Well, it is the first time that Steve Wright has ever admitted any killings. The 67-year-old, who is already serving a whole life sentence, also pleaded guilty to the attempted kidnap of Emily Doherty the day before the murder. A consultant forensic scientist who helped prove Steve Wright killed the women in Ipswich told us it is unusual for a serial killer to start killing so late in life.
There was a thought that, yes, there may well be other victims previous to the 5 women that were found near Ipswich. Like all cold case reviews that this was, the techniques available now, 20 years later from when I was involved in the case, have improved very much. So it may well be, and I suspect it probably is, that they've exploited the improvements in forensic science over that period of time to obtain, I would have thought, fairly compelling evidence.
And the point that you don't start becoming a serial killer at the age of 42 has led the Daily Mirror to quote some of those other women that he might be linked to, in fact, including, for example, this is retired intelligence officer Chris Clark, has researched the former QE2 steward's crimes since 2018. He fears that Wright is linked to missing mum of 2, Amanda Duncombe. These are the faces you can see in that right-hand column. The 26-year-old vanished in Ipswich in July 1993, so we're going back even further than Victoria Hall's 1999 murder now. She has never been found. It is believed that she was working in the red light district and using drugs. And certainly the Ipswich murders, they were all sex workers, and some of them murdered in a very short space of time, which brought horror to the town of Ipswich. So, you know, good on the officers who decided to reopen this case, Arlene, 20 years after Victoria Hall's murder.
And I think it shows that sometimes when we think a lot of time has passed, that justice will not be done. But of course, forensic changes over the years, they become more able to look into these things, and therefore cold case reviews are very, very important. And now that there seems to be a pattern around this individual, I'm sure those cases will be looked at again. I very much hope that they will be, because it's an opportunity to seek justice and find some answers and some closures for those families.
Yes, another one, Kelly Pratt, aged 28, also in the red light district, that's 2000. Michelle Bettles, 22, disappeared 2002, east of Norwich. I mean, the list goes on. 1992, another one, Natalie Pearman, aged 16. And it's believed she worked near Wright's pub, the Ferryboat Inn. Her body was found in a lay-by. I mean, they're going to be reopening a number of these cases by the look of it.
Surely. And, I mean, there are so many families that have yet to get the closure, which will just start to afford them the chance, the possibility to begin the road to recovery, which, as we know, just takes so long. And there are other comments from even, you know, sort of former family members of this man. His ex-wife, Diane Cole, is quoted in The Sun as saying he needs to come clean. It's time the families of his other victims had some sort of closure. He needs to break the habit of a lifetime and just tell the truth. She says, I don't think this is the end. And so I'm sure the police will be asking how many other missing women who have been linked to him can he be asked about, to see if he will finally come clean 25 years at least on. But as you said, in the case of some of these disappearances and murders, they happened well over that.
Yeah, and you see this smiling face of Steve Wright, who could prove to be one of Britain's worst serial killers. But as I said, the police no doubt will be looking again at some of these missing women's cases. Well, coming up next, why FIFA boss Gianni Infantino has told us that he wants to apologise to British football fans.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Well, next tonight, the FIFA president has told Sky News that he apologises to British football fans for joking about them. Here's what Gianno Infantino told my colleague Yalda Hakim, and she asked him why he had said that for the first time in history, no Brit was arrested during a World Cup after the tournament in 2022.
First of all, I use the word Brit. You know, that no Brit was arrested at the World Cup.
So you offended the whole...
So I offended, the Scots, the Welsh and the Northern Irish, so I need to first apologise to the... I apologise. It was meant to be more of a light-hearted remark to show that actually, the World Cup in Qatar was a celebration, was a peaceful event, and everyone came together in a peaceful way.
Well, it makes the front page of the Daily Star. Infantino, I'm a Brit. Sorry, fans. Anyway, you don't like the word Brit anyway, do you, Arlene, I guess?
Don't mind, as long as it includes Northern Ireland. And clearly I felt he was looking down the camera and apologising to me there when he said, sorry, Northern Ireland. Yes. Because, of course, he didn't mean Northern Ireland fans. He actually meant English fans.
Yeah, it did, it did.
Yeah.
Don't forget, he also gave Trump that Peace Prize, do you remember?
Yes, we do.
We've got the pictures of that. He also explained why he thought that was appropriate. Should we have a listen?
For some time we were thinking about, we should do something to reward people who do something. And when this whole situation recently, also with Gaza last year, happened, I mean, how many? 60,000 people were killed, died in Gaza. And then it stopped. It did stop. But if you manage to save lives, to protect your people and other people around the world, well, you deserve respect.
Aubrey.
It seems slightly revisionist to heap credit on Donald Trump for all of his sort of efforts to obtain peace, given, of course, that he's been very friendly with Vladimir Putin and sort of seemed to side with the Russian president over the war in Ukraine. Obviously, there's been the incident in Venezuela that happened days after the the Peace Prize from FIFA was awarded. So I think it's a little bit optimistic.
Yes, awarded to a Venezuelan opposition leader as well, to be fair. It is past. Let's take a look, shall we, at the stories making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Starting, as you can see, with The Guardian. It leads with calls for Lord Mandelson to face a police inquiry following allegations he shared sensitive government documents with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It is also the main story for The Eye. Lord Mandelson reported to police for leaking number 10 files to Epstein, the paper says. The Mirror says many of the leaks occurred while Lord Mandelson was serving as a minister in Gordon Brown's cabinet. The Times also leads on Lord Mandelson, saying a shocked Gordon Brown demands a number 10 inquiry. That story also makes the front page of the Telegraph. Mandelson leaked number 10 emails to Epstein. Front of the Mail too, saying Labour's dark lord now faces a criminal inquiry. The Metro, meantime, leads with concerns around Maltbook, which is a new social media network for more than 1.5 million AI bots that humans are barred from joining. The Financial Times leads with Donald Trump pledging to lower tariffs on India to 18% after Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed to halt purchases of Russian oil. Let's protect our children from knife harm. That is the mother of Harvey Wilgoose, who was stabbed to death at the age of 15 by a fellow pupil, asking for all schools to introduce mandatory knife security arches. While The Sun reports on rumours of a relationship between the reality TV star Kim Kardashian and the Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton. The Star leading then with that apology from the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, to British football fans for joking about them. Well, let's take a look at more of the newspapers, shall we? Going into the Eye, which talks about the prospect or not of economic growth. Aubrey.
Yes, so this is a report from EY, and it suggests that Britain's economic growth is going to slow sharply this year. It had it forecast as 1.4% growth in 2025, and it's going to drop to 0.9% this year, just a very, very slight revision up from the 0.8%. What's been blamed for this? Well, some measures in Rachel Reeves' various budgets, which have obviously piled some pressure on business, including increases in national insurance. There have been some policies like the increase in the living wage, which have had a knock-on effect for companies which say that they're able to give their staff fewer pay rises and employ fewer people because, of course, the cost of employing one person has risen. And so that's the sort of series of explanations given for this downgrading of growth.
Yes, I do read, in the meantime, further tax rises may not be expected in 2026, which would make everyone go phew, probably, after what they've seen so far.
Yes, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there are a lot of small businesses closing all of the time. I mean, locally, even my local greengrocer is closing this weekend because he cannot deal with the increase in costs, operating costs that he has. And I'm incredibly sad about that. A lovely local business. And we also need to talk about the Employment Rights Bill, don't we? Because that has come into law now. And I know a lot of employers are saying we're simply not going to employ more people because we can't take the risk of day one rights for these people. And they're very worried about it. And they're very worried about the fact that we talked about AI earlier on. No doubt we'll talk about it again. What impact will AI have on manufacturing in the future as well? Will that shrink the number of people, actual people working on the ground? So there's a lot going on in the economy. I'm not surprised that EY have made this prediction because some of us have been saying for some time that the policy environment as well as the tax increases are leading to a shrinkage in the economy.
Yes, to be fair, the paper also says global uncertainty is taking its toll, including Donald Trump's tariff threats and high energy prices triggered by Russia's war against Ukraine, which we've all known and loved for the last 4 years or so, haven't we? Let's go, Arlene, to the Daily Telegraph, which is that cancer is surging among women under 50 without any such rise for men. And this is new research showing this.
Yes, and it's all to do with the different types of cancer which women take as opposed to men. For men, the predominance is around lung cancer and stomach cancer, and there's been a sharp decrease in the number of men smoking, and that obviously is a very good thing and is having an impact on the number of lung cancers that are happening for men. But on the other hand, for women, skin cancers, breast cancers, thyroid cancers are on the increase. That, of course, is a great worry, aligned with the fact that people are having to wait longer for cancer diagnosis and treatment now, which is very, very concerning.
And also concerning is that sharper trends were seen in the youngest age groups. We're talking about 16% rise among women below the age of 50, contrasted with no rise among men. Also suggesting that some things that could be brought in, for example, is an ID check. I'm presuming to check your age for people wanting to use sunbeds because, you know, you're damaging your skin decades before you might end up with skin cancer.
Yes, we're reading in this report that there are a number of sort of lifestyle choices and changes in behaviour. That's possibly, I suppose, driven by maybe more people seeking sunbeds and getting sort of harmed off them. And there's going to be this National Cancer Plan that's outlined later this week. Really interestingly, it's being led by the Health Minister, Ashley Dalton. She has breast cancer. She was diagnosed at the age of 41 and her disease is incurable, so she has really sort of first-hand experience of this. She feels really personally about it. She speaks to lots of people who are survivors of and people who are living with the disease and the condition. So very well placed, I think, probably to advise on how people can avoid, ending up in a similar situation.
Yeah, a lot of people have real questions about this. Ultra-processed food is listed too.
Yes.
We know that more women drink wine, men have reduced their smoking, so that might level off their cancer rates. But looking forward to hearing more about that, and certainly very personal and poignant if it's given, as you said, by somebody who is suffering from cancer. Now, coming up next, we will take a quick break and then have a look at more of the day's stories. Back in a minute.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Let's just bring you a bit of breaking news, and that is it does appear that the Clintons have now agreed that they will testify before a congressional committee looking into Jeffrey Epstein. It's a bit of an oblique statement, in fact, from their Deputy Chief of Staff, Angel Orena, suggesting that they negotiated in good faith, you did not, talking about the committee's earlier statements on this. They told you under oath what they know, but you don't care. But the former president and former Secretary of State will be there. They look forward to setting a precedent that applies to everyone. Certainly, they had earlier said that they would not be testifying. So clearly, they now feel it is presumably in their interests to appear now. And it sounds very explicitly like they are laying down the gauntlet for the sitting president, who obviously is enjoying his second term, having served for 4 years in the White House at a really very sort of crucial period. And so Trump's obviously been named quite significantly in the Epstein files, faced a lot of flack, particularly from some of his very sort of rabid supporters for the significant delay that there's been in effectively coming to office, partly on a platform of promising to publish this trove of documents and then them seeing the light of day. And, of course, they've been published in tranches. I don't know how many more there might be to come yet, but this will certainly be a challenge that Donald Trump will face questions about whether he's willing to do the same. Yes, the Oversight Committee, which is investigating this, the Congressional Committee, had earlier said, after defying lawful subpoenas, Bill and Hillary Clinton are trying to dodge contempt by requesting special treatment, with a sort of 3-page note from them as well, suggesting the Clintons are not above the law. And that's why we had that Deputy Chief of Staff statement that they were negotiating in good faith, that they would be there. I mean, presumably you approve anybody who's going to come and give evidence like this.
And I think that will put up pressure, as Aubrey says, on everybody else, because if the Clintons are going to give evidence to this committee, then why can't Lord Mandelson, why can't Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor? Of course, they're not American citizens. However, they will still want to hear from those people, and I think that the pressure will now come on them, particularly if Bill Clinton is going to give evidence. OK. We will certainly get more on that as well. Everybody asking exactly what be there means, whether they will indeed testify. So clarity required, but there seems to have been a bit of a spat and negotiations with that congressional committee, the Oversight Committee, who've been investigating Epstein. Let's delve back into the newspapers, shall we, including alcohol sales. Show January did not stay dry. I blame the rain. But anyway, what's the paper blaming?
Well, there's some figures that show that 4 years ago, in January 22, alcohol sales decreased by 42%.
Incredible.
More than any other month of the year, which is obviously evidence of, I suppose, one, people cutting back on alcohol, possibly deliberately, also possibly motivated by the fact that they want to sort of save money. People feel a little bit sort of more dour and thrifty in January. But when you compare it to the figures this year, it says that the drop was only 25%. So markedly different, although still some drop. I have to say, as a millennial who thinks that Gen Z are far too sort of averse to drinking alcohol...
Gen Z start then?
That's a good question. I think they're about 4 years younger than me. But they're also...
And a lot younger than me.
They go to university and sort of see it as a virtue that they, you know, they don't drink and they don't go out.
There's a lot of young people.
This is fantastic news. Yeah. And at a time when obviously the pub sector is really struggling, I hope that this shows that people are going out and doing their bit for their local pub.
Yeah. Or it could mean in January 2022 that people had stocked up that year and didn't buy in January. No, but seriously, I think it's quite interesting. The first time I heard of damp is the new dry, I didn't know what damp January was until my daughter's fiancé informed me what it was, but damp January seems to be a thing now as well as dry January.
Yeah.
Well, I take it so seriously. I mean, 1 year I did do dry January and I didn't even eat beer-battered fish and chips.
Really?
That is how sort of puritanical I was about it. So this is good news.
Yeah. Should we talk Grammys or the Grumpies as well, which is how the Metro's describing it, with all the pictures too. But the Grumpies, which is the lower part of that, suggests that Trump rages, a total loser, after the host of the Grammys mocks him over the Epstein links while stars take aim at ice. Should we have a look and listen to what they had to say about that?
Being a history person, I see over the centuries the same things happening over and over again, slave catchers, all of the history that is kind of in our DNA. To see it unfolding in this way right now, it's both depressing but also like, well, if not now, when do we speak up?
Before I say
thanks to God, I'm gonna say, eyes out. We're not savage, we're not animals, we're not aliens, we are humans and we are Americans.
I guess I want to say I'm up here as a granddaughter of an immigrant. Yeah, I'm a product of bravery, and I think those people deserve to be celebrated.
No one is illegal on stolen land.
With the immigration situation, you know, I'm Latino and I gotta keep supporting my people. Even though if I'm not in their situation, it's our people.
Immigrants built this country, literally. So this is for them, for all children of immigrants.
I don't know how you feel about sort of showbiz and politics mixing. I mean, it's quite often, it does happen, but...
Yeah, but what I object to is these people are very privileged. They're very fortunate to have such wonderful careers. And instead of celebrating their music, they get up and they take whatever is the cause of the year. And we've seen what the cause of the year this year is, and talking about stolen land and going completely over the top about everything. So, I mean, it's not something that I would watch, to be honest with you. And, I mean, some of the outfits are just vulgar.
You're just going off-piste there, aren't you?
I am going off-piste, but it really is. I mean, when I look at that and I look at some of the outfits, I say, oh, my goodness.
I think there really is something for everyone here. I mean,
really?
First of all, you've got tributes to Ozzy Osbourne, obviously, who died last year. And then you've got this amazing story about the Dalai Lama, who, I didn't realise this, but he's published a collection of his thoughts on mindfulness, compassion and health. And he apparently prevailed in the spoken word album category. Collected his award for him was Rufus Wainwright, and the Dalai Lama said on X, I don't see it as something personal, but as a recognition of our shared universal responsibility. So light and shade at the Grammys.
Not just Grammy winner, ever, you know, multiple award ceremony winner, I think, probably. Because how old is he?
So many awards. He doesn't have room on his trophy shelf for a Grammy.
No. I think he's 90, isn't he? Did I read?
I'm not sure the Dalai Lama would have approved of some of the outfits at the Grammys, but that's beside it.
On that note, it's time to conclude our programme. Thank you so much. Lovely to have you both on for the first time on The Wrap. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
So coming up, we have all the sport, the late-night transfer deadline day deals, plus our Sunderland moved up to 8th in the Premier League on Monday Night Football.